All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 of Triple Threat Talk. I'm your host, Connor Ryan. Today's episode is Thursday, November 7th. This is going up tomorrow on Friday, or, well, whatever. Just had a really great, exciting night in the NBA last night. Main game, obviously, was the Warriors versus Celtics. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Clippers and Sixers game as well. And then possible rumors with Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, JJ Redick, and his coaching style. We'll have some questions from the Instagram. And then my dream starting five. Thank you again. If you're listening on Spotify, appreciate you. If you're watching the YouTube, I appreciate you. Follow the Instagram at Talkin' Triple. Follow the Twitter page at Talkin' Triple. Follow the YouTube Triple Threat Talk podcast. Let's get right into it. Warriors Celtics in Boston last night. Game one of the two that they will play each other in this season. Warriors came into this matchup 7-1. Boston came into this matchup, I think, also 7-1. Actually, hold on. I know the Celtics are now 7-2. Let me check the Warriors record. They came into the matchup 6-1, left 7-1. They won. Yeah, the Warriors won last night, 118-112. Any questions that we had about the Warriors and in terms of is this team legit, they were answered very much so. Now, I know people are going to say, the Celtics were without Jalen and without Kristaps, obviously, but the Warriors were without Brandon Podziemski and both teams, regardless, it was going to be a good matchup. The Warriors both of them are one of three teams to be in top 5 in both defensive and offensive rating in the season so far. The only other team is the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are still undefeated. As well, there's just so much history pretty recently. I remember the season that the Warriors went 73-9. Before they had 2 home losses during that season, the first of which were against the Isaiah Thomas-led Boston Celtics with Avery Bradley, Jonas Jerebko, Marcus Smart, everything like that. But obviously, the more recent one was the 2022 finals. Steph was a monster that series. He willed his way. He did everything and got his 4th ring, beating the Celtics in Boston. Obviously, this was coming off of their final matchup last season, which the Celtics beat them by 50, which was their 3rd 50-point win that season. But the main storyline was Steve Kerr and Jason Tatum. Obviously, if you are a basketball fan, you know Jason Tatum was coached by Steve Kerr during the Olympics as the U.S. made their quest to win another gold medal in basketball. But a lot of the Boston fans had taken issue with how Steve Kerr approached coaching that run, with the fact that Jason Tatum was a DNP for 2 whole games. I think they were both games against Serbia. I am a Celtics fan. Was I upset? Yes. But was I also understanding? Yeah, I was. It very much is the aspect of there are only 5 guys. But there's also going to be the side from my perspective of I'm a fan. I want the players of my team to, get in to play in matchups. And sure, Tatum wasn't shooting well. He didn't shoot well in the playoffs. And everybody saw that. And I think that's why it was such a imminent factor of why he worked on his shot over the summer. But it was just a very much a revenge game, hoping for the Celtics. And Tatum balled out last night. 32 points on 50% shooting from the field, 50% from three, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. But I think it was like potential assists was like upwards of 14. So shots just weren't falling for the Celtics. But and then there's also the other side with Jalen um, not making the team as well after winning Finals MVP and being just one of the more consistent players throughout the season last year. Like I also didn't have a total issue with that. Like roles are a huge part of it. That's why Drew and Derek were on the team. Like Halliburton was on the team because of his playmaking ability. Even though like obviously the players I'm listing, very talented players. Like they deserve to be on that team, whatever. But it's just I think with the Tatum situation, why people were so flustered by it or just confused of why it was happening, was because out of all the players that made all NBA first team, Tatum was the only American. It was Shea, Luka, Tatum, Giannis, and Jokic. Jokic is Serbian. Giannis is Greek. Luka is Slovenian, and then Shea is Canadian. Jason is from St. Louis. And so a lot of it is kind of that aspect. As a Celtics fan, like you kind of have you kind of understand why you're mad, but it is like you're not going to really put him in like a situation most of the time over a LeBron, over a KD. You don't want him to play your 5, even though like there are times where like he switched on to a 5 and he can defend pretty well, but still like not consistently. But you know, we saw the game last night, and it very much was the type of atmosphere that everybody was hoping for. Loud Boston crowd when Steve Kerr got announced, showered in boos, and I think he honestly had one of the better responses by just sitting there kind of almost with a smirk on his face, just waving to the crowd. And you got to give credit where credit is due. They had a game plan, they stuck with it, which very much was like, hey, we are one of the best defensive teams for a reason, and we are going to show it. The Celtics do need Jaylen Brown back, and it's like if anybody thinks like that they are a worse team without him, like sure, like Jaylen Brown isn't the best shooter in the world, but what he does is he causes you to like have a man out there. He is as much of a threat to scoring as much as Jason Tatum is. Sure, if you want to say Tatum's the better shooter, sure, but I'd say Jaylen is more deadly from mid-range, more deadly from the paint area. Jaylen Brown is somebody that you do not want to leave open. And for especially just seeing Celtics Twitter, it's like it very much is like a picket fence where it's like, oh, you're either on the side where you want Jaylen on the team, or you're on the side where you're like, oh, I just don't think Jaylen is that useful for our team, which in all honesty is just ridiculous. Having somebody of that potential, of that use, is incredibly important to have. And like they work so well together, Jason and Jaylen do. I know Jaylen, if he wanted to play in that game, or if he could play in that game, he would have been huge for the Celtics, especially with the Warriors game plan, which was just incredibly smart. It was blitz the ball handler after a pick and roll. It was find out who was going to screen, and then it was like, because Andrew Wiggins was going to be guarding Jason Tatum, and then a lot of the times it would either be like Gary Payton Jr., Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond from time to time, even Steph. Like Steph has always been criticized for his lack of defense, but he showed it last night and he played a great job. But just it very much felt like the Celtics were pressured, especially in the first half, and it showed. Celtics started off the game great, 14-3 run, and then the Warriors came right back and took the lead right from them. And the Celtics adjusted, but it just wasn't enough. Especially at the end of the game where Celtics just played sloppy. They just felt like they needed to, play hero ball and make a three instead of just responding with the easier basket of like getting to the lane and either going for a foul, either drawing a foul or getting a layup. But it's November. There's plenty of time for the Celtics to heal up, to improve. But Brian Scalabrine kind of put it best. He was like, this feels like a game 5 atmosphere where it's like it doesn't feel like it's the end game, but it's like whoever wins kind of has like the momentum going into it. And the Warriors do need it. They have 2 more games on their I think it's a 5-game road trip, and the next 2 don't get any easier. They go to Cleveland to play the Cavs and go to Oklahoma City to play the Thunder. But any questions that fans had on the Warriors being a legit team, they are. Spacing for them is incredibly efficient. They don't use their bigs as much as some teams do, and like Kevon Looney knows that he isn't going to be really getting the ball into like, hey, give me the ball, let me go to work situation. Like Draymond Green like has moments like that. Like this is, if it was Draymond like 8 years ago in the 2016 team, then it'd be like, okay, like that's an offensive threat that we have to worry about. But not as good of a shooter anymore, not as much of a scoring threat, but very much the playmaking asset that makes Steph off ball ability, that makes Steph's off ball ability so effective. And I'll say it, every time Steph Curry takes a shot, I get an aneurysm. I think he's going to make it every time. I think I still have nightmares of Game 4 when from the 22 finals, where I think if the Celtics won that, they have much more confidence going into Game 5. Even if they lose Game 5, they're like, hey, we're going back to Boston for Game 6. Like, like we got to keep our heads up and kind of that atmosphere, where Steph just went crazy in Game 4. And it very much was that last night. It was the Celtics trying to use win the non-Steph minutes as much as possible. But, Warriors pulled it out. Buddy Hield continued to play great, and he's just fitting so well into that system. Jonathan Kuminga, Kyle Anderson, they were hitting shots last night from deep, which I know this season they've haven't been the best 3-point shooters, but shooting is shooting. If shooters are going to shoot, and that's the simple fact of it. You don't get into the league without being able to consistently doing something. You don't get into this league without like not really being able to like show like, hey, I can do stuff. I can improve. I can make shots. Like there are very few like players where you're like, yeah, they only play defense. Especially in like the modern era. You don't really have that where it's like, yeah, this guy's like only in for this team. Like there are no Tony Allens where it's like, hey, this guy's going to guard like Steph and we're fine with him being like an offensive liability. Like you don't really have that a lot. You're going to take more of like the scoring guy maybe before the defense guy, unless like you are in a situation where you say like, hey, like we're willing to work on you and your scoring ability, like kind of like what the Celtics did with Jordan Walsh. And Walsh has obviously improved like quite well over the last year and a half so far while he's been on the team, but obviously not the scoring threat that he is. Like his scoring ability right now is not his fully max potential, and obviously there's room to grow. But yeah, man, Warriors high defensive, just like pressure. They are a gritty team. They corralled in 15 offensive rebounds, especially late. Like it just seemed like Kevon Looney was in the right spot, and Celtics just came up short. But it was just a great game to watch. Two of the best teams in the league, in one of the best atmospheres in the TD Garden. Obviously, people are going to question some of the officiating, but it is what it is. The game's behind us, and it was just a fun watch. So definitely excited. I think their next matchup is in late January, obviously in Golden State. I think that's kind of like around the same time when they played last season, but these might be two completely different teams by the time we next see them. By the next time we see them play each other, so should be interesting to see. Next matchup was the 76ers going to LA to play against the Clippers. This was the second matchup of the ESPN doubleheader. Obviously, the storyline behind this one was Paul George. I don't know why I said LeBron almost, but Paul George going back to the Clippers. I understood why like the fans booed Paul George, but also at the same time, like I don't blame Paul George for getting a little mad at like, or not mad, but just like questioning the boos after the game, and kind of just being like, I wasn't traded. I didn't request a trade. I served my time. And I decided to do what was best for me, which was to take the 4-year max instead of the 3-year max, which Steve Ballmer said he offered to Paul George. But the 76ers came up short. Yeah, they are 1-6 on the season. And it just isn't looking good. I mean, if you were to tell me at the beginning of the season that the Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers would be last in the NBA, tied with the Utah Jazz for the worst record in the league, I wouldn't have believed you. I really don't know. But Paul George so far hasn't been playing great, but I think a lot of that is just like chemistry, and also just like he didn't shoot well last night. Which it's always going to be tough when you have your first game back and against your old team. Let me see here. Also, and they're trying to ease him back into it, which completely understandable. He only played 24 minutes last night. He didn't play the full 30 something that a starter would usually play, especially a player of that caliber. 18 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. Yeah, it's just the 76ers need to figure it out. They obviously don't have Joel for 2 more games. He was considered active last night, but obviously because of the Marcus Hayes situation, he has to serve a 3-game suspension handed out to him by the NBA, which I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I understand why it was given to him, but like I am on the side of Embiid in terms of I think he was in the right more than Hayes was. You just don't talk. You don't talk about deceased family members in harshful tones like that. But and then if things couldn't get worse, Tyrese Maxey is now out for a couple weeks. So there goes one of their main scoring threats. So they're really, really going to need Joel to come back and be Joel Embiid. I don't know. It's just they just don't look like they have an urge to win. I know the Clippers are very much exceeding expectations. Norman Powell with another great night, scoring 26. Zubac has played great so far this season. I think like he has been one of their star players for sure. Like he's like averaging like around 20 points and 10 rebounds a game. James Harden is very much playing his role very well. And I know, and it's pretty crazy that they are only going to get better when Kawhi comes back. Amir Coffey and Derrick Jones Jr. both doing their jobs and helping this team win. And, it's always going to be a bad night when Nicholas Batum rattles in a couple threes. So the 76ers, man, they got to right the ship quick. And if it is just Joel coming back, then it's Joel coming back. But I also don't know if we are like we won't see Joel play every game for the rest of the season. It's not like a scenario where like we know he isn't going to be playing back-to-backs, or at least one of the two back-to-backs. And it just always seems like there is something that just comes up where you just say, "Hey, I'm hurt. I got an injury. I'm not going to be able to play for a little bit." And it's never fun. Never is. Philly is they didn't sign Paul George to say, "Hey, we're going to take this year off and maybe get a good draft pick and reevaluate next year." They signed him to say, "All right, we got our third piece. We have our third guy to compete for a championship." And right now they look extremely far from it. And it is not looking good. But we shall see. Obviously, as I was saying about the Warriors and the Celtics, 3 months from now, we could be talking about how the 76ers are like one of the hottest teams going into the break. And overall, just really, really tough to lose Tyrese Maxey, who I know hasn't played incredibly well this season, but when you have a scorer of that quality, you want him around for sure. Like I he almost would have like kind of, I mean, obviously a more extended role of it, but like kind of how Clay is for the actually no, I guess like how Derek White is for Jalen and Jason. Like Jalen and Jason obviously complement each other very well. So I think Paul George and Joel Embiid are going to complement each other well. And then you have kind of like, hey, you got to worry about this guy too for Tyrese. But so far, it's just it. He does very much benefit from having Joel, and will benefit obviously from having both Joel and Paul George on the court. But we're obviously going to have to wait a little bit to see that, and it sucks. So, but yeah, so we shall see with the how the 76ers respond. Will Paul George become Paul George when he was on the Indiana Pacers, or his MVP caliber season on the Thunder, or is he going to become playoff P and how he was in the bubble against the Nuggets? So, we shall see. Next topic for discussion: Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic on trade rumors. The GM, or I think it was the GM. Let me pull it up. Let me see. I can't remember if it was who said it. Just says, okay. Chicago is expected to put Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic on the trade block at some point this season, per ESPN. Like it makes sense. Like they don't really know, especially after losing DeMar, they don't really know exactly where this team direction is going. They obviously aren't performing to the level that they want to. And Nikola Vucevic has had a very good season so far, so I wouldn't be shocked if it's a sell high on him kind of motivation. And Zach LaVine seems healthy again, so you aren't going to really trade the guy who was not healthy, especially last year, when it was like the peak of his rumors. But I think it's smart for them, especially with this draft class. If you can get like, I don't think they'll get a first round pick, but it's like I don't know if they'll get a first round pick from like a lottery team this class, but if you can get like maybe a first this year, maybe a first next year. I don't know exactly. I'm obviously not a GM. I don't know trade values that well, but if you can get a couple picks, then I would definitely consider it a success. They're a very young team. Kobe White has played great last year. Lonzo, if when he's healthy, he obviously is a very good player. I'm very high on Matas Buzelis. I've been high on him since high school, but I do think for that team, I think just the best thing is they do need a restart. And with that, good riddance. It has to happen. And Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic have both been there for a good amount of time, and I do think their time is wrapping up. Unfortunately, but I I do think it's going to lead to better things for the Chicago Bulls. So, but we obviously shall see. Um, Memphis Grizzlies played the Los Angeles Lakers last night, and it was a game for sure. The final score was 131 to 114 in favor of the Grizzlies. I remember dating back to last year when I think it was the Lakers won 123 to 118 in Memphis. Ja was dealing with he had just came back from his suspension, and then he got injured, and then um, he was in street clothes that night, and LeBron had that crazy dunk to end the game instead of just running out the clock. And I remember, and Ja says, just wait until I get dressed, wait until I suit up. And well, Ja proved his point. The Lakers didn't play without AD or Rui, and the Grizzlies are just definitely a team not to mess with. They are a very strong team. They are still without Desmond Bane, and they are still without Marcus Smart, but they are not only a good team, they are a fun team. Ja Morant is the engine of that team. Jaren Jackson helps with being a great defensive backbone. And then you have two bigs in Zach Edey and Jay Huff who are very much providing and balancing that team, especially not only just with height, but spacing as well. Both surprisingly good shooters. And then it's just like Scottie Pippen Jr. has been playing great this season. He doesn't really have a lot of the pressure of LA, and I'm excited to see how he continues to progress. But I think something needs to happen with the Lakers. They started the year 3-1. I think they are now 1-3 in their last four. Or let me double check. I think they started the season 3-0 and are now currently 4-4. Yeah. So they were third in the West, and now they're ranked 10th. But obviously, only game 8. But yeah, JJ Redick had a pretty interesting press conference last night, and kind of not even just lightly, but blatantly calling out D'Angelo Russell and saying like, yeah, he just didn't look like he wanted to compete, and that's why he didn't really play a lot of the. That's why he only played 21 minutes, and then even walking out of his presser. And I like it. I like that. JJ is having like a no BS kind of system where he's like, hey, I'm gonna give it to you honestly. I'm just gonna tell it to you straight and just say like we didn't play well, or like you heard what I said, and kind of that aspect. It's obviously still very young in the season, and with AD in that game and with Rui, things obviously would change, but it does raise a tad bit of concern. They've lost 2 straight now to the Pistons and now the Grizzlies, and it. I think the same way the Pacers and the Bucks were a rivalry last year, kind of like how like small tensions and how like even with like the game ball from last year with Giannis and the in-season tournament, I think the Grizzlies and the Lakers have a lot of potential to be something similar of that, where it's like where it's not exactly like lifelong rivalries, but it's like, oh, something is brewing here, and just two very good teams competing, wanting to succeed, and it is always fun whenever you have great matchups that lead to great games. And the Lakers and Grizzlies for the last couple of seasons have always put on good products. I think it was 2 seasons ago. Yeah, it was 2023 season when they played off against each other in, I think it was the first round, in which the Lakers beat the Grizzlies when the Grizzlies, I think, were like the 2 seed, I want to say. I can't remember exactly. I think they were. But yeah, and like Lonnie Walker had like that crazy series and helped propel them during one of the games. But very, very entertaining for sure between those two teams. Final matchup we'll cover Thunder versus the Nuggets. Thunder finally lose their first game. They're now 7-1 on the season. But I mean, it, of course, Nikola Jokic played like Nikola Jokic does, which is unreal. Finishing the night, 23 points, 20 rebounds, 16 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Didn't shoot great, but you know, he's the best player on the planet for a reason. Russell Westbrook had an unreal night, 29 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists on 66% shooting, and even shooting, I think it was 50% from 3. Oh, 75% from 3. Sorry. 3 of 4 from 3. And Christian Braun, Michael Porter Jr. both provided very well. Peyton Watson with the game-winning block, which was very cool to see. My friend Hunter texted me and said, "Hey, Christian Brown. Christian Brown could definitely win Most Improved Player," and I could see it. I know when you think of the Nuggets right now, there are the core four, which is Jokic, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, and Jamal, and obviously NBA Twitter will think about Russ and kind of his position on that team. But Christian Brown has, I know it's been kind of a rough season so far for the Nuggets, but obviously they're 5-3 right now. They're finding their footing. They're getting on the right track. Christian Brown has definitely been a bright spot, and it's just been great to see. And that team is only going to get better. The more and more Christian Brown improves, and when you get when you get Aaron Gordon back and Jamal Murray back, that team is going to improve. It's a pretty solid 6-man rotation to have of Brown, Jokic, Murray, Gordon, Porter Jr. and Westbrook. And then if you get Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther in the mix even more, I mean, it's just you can't really quit on the Nuggets right now. You can't really quit on any team. But definitely interesting to see how they are going to progress throughout the season. For the Thunder, just great performance from Shea, great performance from J-Dub. Not the best shooting night from Chet, but still ends up with 15 and 10, and just didn't have a great time on the interior. You almost do have to question, though, how much of, from time to time for sure, how much of an offensive liability is Alex Caruso going to be? I understand. I guess almost like a Tony Allen situation. I understand his defensive impact. Like I'm looking at the stats right now. 6 rebounds, 4 steals, 2 blocks for a guy who I think is like 6'4", 6'5", something around there. But 1 of 9 from the field, 0 for 3 from 3. That isn't going to cut it. that isn't like, especially in late game scenarios, like we saw it with the Nuggets last night. It was like when they with the Nuggets, it would be like for defense they would bring in Russ, and then for offense they would bring in like I think it was Christian Brown, and like obviously scenarios like that work from time to time, but it is tough in terms of matchups. Like it isn't always going to work out like that where you get like these late game back to backs and where you can like plug and play like certain players. And I know it happened the other night when with the Raptors games, like on offense they would bring in Christian Brown and on defense they'd put in Russ. Um, Mike Malone does a great job with that team with his squad, but it should be pretty interesting. Moving forward and seeing how that team responds. I definitely think they're going to contend a for a playoff spot, but it will be interesting to see how it continues. So yeah. Now we are going to get to some questions that from my Instagram page. You can follow me at Talkin' Triple on Instagram. And basically about 24 hours or the day before every episode, I record on Mondays and Thursdays, and I release the episodes on Tuesdays and Fridays. So on Sundays and Wednesdays, I put out a poll and say, hey, any questions for me? What do you guys want me to talk about? What do you guys want to know? Doesn't always have to be basketball related, but usually it is. First question I got is I got the same question from both my friend Ben. Ben, hope you're well. And actually also my dad. Dad, hope you are well. Who is your second favorite NBA team? I and it kind of took a lot of bit of thinking for me to give this answer. I couldn't really say another team in the East because of the Celtics. If I did, I would say the Orlando Magic, partly because of their social media team and the song, and just every time they would win, it would just pop up on my TikTok page, and I'd always be like, Orlando Magic, Orlando Magic, and I would always just get so hyped. I was born in the Bay Area. I was born in San Francisco area, so I could say Golden State, but right now I think it's the Grizzlies. Just Ja is extremely likable. I understand, obviously, he's had some off the court issues, but still just a very good team. One of my favorite players of all time is on that team in Marcus Smart. Jaren Jackson Jr., I think, is an incredibly underrated player and just one of the standouts or one of the just more productive big men in terms of the defensive side of the ball, and definitely deserves a lot more praise than he gets. And I mean, Jay Huff right now is like leading the renaissance for like whenever Jay Huff gets a block, I'm always yelling, "Oh, the Huff stuff! You got to get there!" Scottie Pippen Jr., I remember watching him at Sierra Canyon with Kenyon Martin Jr. and Cassius Stanley. Wow, I haven't said that name in a long time. But yeah, just overall like a very fun team. But like the Warriors are up there for sure when they're not playing the Celtics. Just watching Steph Curry play basketball is one of the most entertaining things I would say an NBA fan can do. So I'd say probably the Grizzlies and the Magic though. For right now, I would say are my second favorite team, second and third right now. So yeah. Next question comes from my friend Andy, also known as Clyde. Kitty Clyde. Thoughts on the in-season tournament? I really like it. I really do. I was extremely iffy on it last season. I wasn't really sure on how it would play, how it would work out. but it brought a lot of competition. It actually does seem like they care, which was kind of the concern I had. And I also like how a lot of it is like point margin. Like point margin is kind of like what determines the tiebreaker instead of just saying like beyond just record. Um, and so it was really fun to see. Like I remember the Celtics needed to beat the Bulls, and I think they needed to win by like 22 points or something. And so in like the third, either like the middle of the third quarter or like the beginning of the fourth quarter, Psycho Joe Mazzulla was like fouling Andre Drummond, even like just to like get him to the line just so the Celtics could get another possession. Um, I think it just feeds into competition for sure. And also it's just it is like for a while I was like a little concerned it was going to just be a marketing thing and just say like, hey, like this is something for us to get more ads, to get more media deals, but the players really bought into it, and it was exciting to see. Um, and overall, just a really good product. So far. I'm excited to talk about that next episode. A little spoiler. That will be the main topic for next Tuesday's episode. We'll be discussing the in-season tournament because that's when the first games are on that Tuesday. We will go through group by group, team by team, and just the route that that each team has and who I think will win it. But I would say I'm a fan of it for sure so far. So yeah, hope that answers your question, Andy. Final question. From Luke Turo. Is Neemias Queta an all-star? No, probably not. But Rob Williams light for sure. He I was a fan of Neemias last year. Shout out to Neemias Queta, backup, well, third string center for the Celtics when Kristaps is healthy. So we didn't really get to see a ton of action from him last year, and also obviously not in the playoffs. But like what he provides for the Celtics is a spark. He is a spark plug, and his energy is so infectious. Like when he had a stretch last night against the Warriors where he had a putback dunk, a poster on Kevon Looney, and then a block on Steph. And it's like the Garden can get loud. And it like it sometimes takes, it doesn't always take a lot to get them that loud. But like if you want them to get really loud, like you need like a string of events to happen. All those things happen within like 2 minutes. And Neemias Queta has played great so far. He gets the building rocking. He is incredibly talented. My only concern with him right now is his offensive production. I just feel like sometimes he'll catch the ball in space and almost like not know what to do or not know exactly how far he is from the basket. So like he'll even like turn and like go for like a jump hook or something. And then he'll realize, oh, I'm actually like a foot away from the basket. I could have just turned up and just like dunked it because of how big his wingspan is. But then also I just feel like, and then there's also the times where he's like, oh, like I think I'm like so close I can just give a easy layup, but he's like 6-7 feet away and he should have did the jump hook. So I think if he understands his spacing a little bit better, like, and also like defensive rotations, I think there were times where, especially last night, where he would get lost in space. But overall, I think Neemias Queta has been very much a underrated bright spot. Like in terms of the bench players for the Celtics, people are obviously going to talk about Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser when he has a really good night, but Neemias Queta definitely got a product. He was on, I think, Sacramento's G League team, and God bless Brad Stevens. Of course, he sees hidden gems. He was like, oh, we need this guy. He's like 7'1", just crazy athletic, crazy long, and just a very good player. Just a great guy to go to. And when he gets going, I think he is a huge part of the Celtics getting going. So yeah, those are the questions for the episode. Final part of the episode. I gave my top 5 players currently in the NBA at the end of the first episode. And then I got a question from over the summer that I always think of that is a pretty good understanding of like, you get to understand like what a person's basketball like thought process or philosophy is. And like what excites them. And so I decided I wanted to talk about my dream starting 5. This isn't so much like, oh, what do you think would be the greatest starting 5 of all time? I think of this team as like, all right, these are like 5 of my favorite players all time, and I get to like watch them on the court together and just like see them play. Like, do I think this team would actually work? Not really, because you'll like understand why in a little bit, but like these are like 5 players that I would be like, oh my gosh, if I could watch like these 5 in their prime all play together, like that would be like a fever dream kind of thing. So my point guard, I have Steve Nash, 2-time MVP. Soon, I think, if not already, will be a Hall of Famer. I think he already is. Wait, let me double check that. I'm pretty sure. He is. Yeah, he was. Wow, I'm dumb. He was inducted in 2018. Steve Nash. When I got into basketball, he was on the Suns, and then like when I really got into basketball, he was traded from the Suns to the Lakers, and which obviously didn't work out. And I know a lot of people in my generation of basketball watchers will kind of think of that when they think of Steve Nash, but you got to think of the 7 seconds or less Steve Nash. Just one of the best passers of all time, coming out of Santa Clara, Canadian, played with Dirk to start his career, and then goes to Phoenix, plays with Amari, plays with Sean Marion, Quentin Richardson, Rajah Bell, the GOAT, Jason Richardson. Just one of the more calculated players. Was never a 3-point shooter, or could shoot the 3, but was always like a free throw line extended kind of mid-range shooter, could get to the basket with ease, but just one of the most pure passers that I've ever gotten to witness. And I think he was just somebody that was just so easy to watch for me. Like watching his highlights, like watching his passing highlights. I remember I saw somebody talking about like this with Tyus Jones. They're like, oh, I've watched all of Tyus Jones' assists this season, and it is maybe the most boring thing in the world. Well, guess what? A lot of those like really good playmakers, they create space effectively, or they create like plays effectively, not by doing like the flashy behind the back or like around your back kind of pass. Like there are times where Steve Nash would fool you with like a between the legs pass or like a quick give and go kind of thing. But like he was just like a gritty, like a hardworking guy, and was just one of my favorite players growing up. And just one of my favorite players to watch now even. So Steve Nash would be my point guard. My shooting guard, Tracy McGrady. I only really got to watch in like on TV at least Rockets Tracy McGrady, which no dirt at him. Still a very good player. He was no Orlando Tracy McGrady. When people talk about like the Jalen Greens of the world, like these high flying, like freak athletes who could also like shoot it from like 35 feet and drain it, like the Anthony Edwards of the world. Imagine if Jason Tatum body with Anthony Edwards springs. That was Tracy McGrady. Tracy McGrady, I remember I found out about, like, I really got into him because of his like the 13 points in 30 seconds against the Spurs, and just like his, like the way that he could like just change a ball game was just unreal. And then I found out, I was like, oh, he's like one of the best players of all time. And then I remember I was talking to somebody and they were like, yeah, he was like really good. And I was like, what? And then I remember I watched like the Magic clips and I was like, oh my God, how did he not win? Like, how did he not win MVP like every year? And it was just, injuries and just couldn't get the right team success. But just Tracy McGrady still is like just one of the most entertaining players to watch, and doesn't like, there's nothing I can say that about Tracy that I'm just like he couldn't do. There was nothing he really couldn't do. Like, sure, like not the best defender of all time, but he had the length, he had the size, he had the speed, the quickness, the agility, and also the jumping ability to make up for it. But just overall, like, one of the best players of all time, one of the best peaks of all time for sure. Even without winning an MVP, and just God, T-Mac was so good. For my small forward, Larry Bird. It's very much is kind of a homer pick, and I'll explain why I choose Bird. Why I really chose Bird with my next selection. Obviously I'm 22, so I obviously never got to see Larry play. But my dad got to watch Larry Bird play. And I don't know, like, the way that I talk about basketball now is like I feel like whenever I talk about basketball with my dad, he'll bring up Larry Bird like he's like he was like he gets paid to do it. Like, he talks about Larry Bird like it is it's his job. Larry Legend, just so many stories, so many stories, and then you do more research and you're just like, oh, this is a cold ass white boy from Indiana. This guy balls. And then you're like, oh my God, he has 3 MVPs. Oh my God, he's like he has all these rings and everything like that. Just so unsuspecting. Just one of the just coldest players of all time. He was so good. Very much, I think, like, I know a lot of people like talk about like, would LeBron be successful in like the 80s and the 90s, which I think he would have 100%. Like, somebody that size, that build, like, you don't really, like, sure, he would get pushed around, but he wouldn't get bodied incredibly. Like he would have his way, not like all the time, but like I think like he would, like, with his speed and his explosiveness, I think he would have crushed it. How people talk about Luka is how I think about Larry Bird. Larry Bird would cruise in this era with all the spacing, with just like the kind of the not nearly as much focus on defense. Like, Larry Bird is one of the best 3-point shooters of all time in terms of efficiency, but not in terms of total, because of just like he kind of came into the league when the 3-pointer was like introduced. And it was very much not like today, obviously, where it's like, hey, like the mathematical side of things, where it's like, oh yeah, if we shoot 53s a game, then we have a higher chance of winning. But in terms of just like, could do it all, could get to the rim, could slash, could cut very well, could create his own shot, very good defensively, and extremely underratedly athletic. Very underrated athleticism. And I need some grit on my team, and I think that's where Larry Legend comes in. But I think a lot of my grit comes in with this next player, who is my 4, and also my favorite basketball player of all time, Kevin Garnett. The reason why I said I chose Larry for a very specific reason was because my junior year or my sophomore year of high school, I transferred to a boarding school, and my friends and I, we would play 2K like all night. Like we would like finish homework and then we just like hang out for like the next like 2 hours and then play 2K. And we would play 3-on-3 blacktop specifically. And I felt like I not only was I like one of the better players, but I felt like I had curated it like through practice, like the best possible team. And I would choose Orlando T-Mac, Prime Boston Celtics Larry Bird, and then Minnesota Kevin Garnett. And I would win like pretty handedly. Like I think I think I maybe lost like once or twice, but like I would win like basically every matchup. Kevin Garnett is the reason I became a basketball fan. His intensity, his passion, his love of the game, his just will to win. Like I don't think I could have picked a better year for me to become a basketball fan than to watch the big 3 in Boston of Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett win an NBA title in their first year together. I remember I cried when he got his knee injury in 2009. And I remember I cried again the next year when they lost in Game 7. But Kevin Garnett, man, and I know people are only going to think of the Outstanding by the Gap Band edit where it's him in the Nets uniform and him playing there. Never seen such a long 2 be taken so consistently, but he made it every time. And just like, it looked like he could block anything. It looked like he could jump up and touch the top of the backboard. It looked like he was the original guard 1 through 5, in my opinion. Like there were some guys where it's like, oh, this is like one of the best defenders of all time, but it's like in terms of a versatility factor, I don't know if there is anybody that beats Kevin Garnett. Great floor spacing, great drive ability, great post work, but almost have him at like a stretch 4 kind of thing because I know he can shoot the 3, and just one of my favorite players of all time, man. Just actually not one of my favorite player of all time. I love Kevin Garnett. That's like a dream of mine is to meet Kevin Garnett, but it is what it is. I'm just rambling at this point. All right, center. It's the dream. Hakeem Olajuwon. I have the old Rockets jersey. I didn't really know a lot about him, and then my dad gave me an NBA book. It was like I don't even know if I still have it anymore, but it was like soft cover, and it was like a 500-page book, but it was just full of stats. It was like from like the mid 2000s, and just like talking about like basketball and like who like the pioneers of each position were, of each stat, yada yada yada. And I remember I got to the block section, and I remember I went to my dad and I said, "Who is this?" And it was Hakeem Olajuwon. And just like he was so happy that I asked. I had asked him that. And I remember when NBA 2K12 came out, my brother got it for an Easter present. It was either Easter or Christmas. I can't remember exactly. But of course, me being the younger brother, I thought, oh, like if he gets it, it's also mine. So what did I do? I took it from his presents. I went straight downstairs, put it in the Xbox, and I just started playing the Legend challenges because that was like the year because the year before was when Jordan was on the cover and you could do like the Jordan challenges. But the next year was like the showcase, like the Legends showcase. And I remember it was Hakeem versus, it was like the 94-95 Rockets versus the 94-95 Nuggets. And I remember it was like, you just had to win the game and you get both teams. And it was the first one that I did. It was the first one that I actually beat. And I remember I was like, oh my gosh, this Hakeem is so good. Yada, yada, yada. And I like learned how to say his name. I learned like how to like I watched his like footwork. I watched how he played defense. Like he kind of like helped me as like a kid like understand the defensive side of basketball, where Kevin Garnett was like, oh, I was like, I'll learn offense from him, not really realizing that he was also one of the greatest defensive players of all time, but also just one of the funniest. And like when KG talks about like um talks about Hakeem with I think it's $1 million worth a game. Those Philly guys that work for Barstool, and he's like, I'm gonna hit him with lateral movement. He won't touch me, and it's just like, what? Like that's the trash talk, and just one of the funniest guys, just an ambassador of the game, but just so good. Like watching the Dream Shake on YouTube, crossing up David Robinson like it was no problem. That I have a jersey of his. I have the blue pinstripe Rockets jersey with like the big Rockets logo. One of my favorite jerseys of all time. Like I'll let my brother borrow some jerseys of mine. Like I know he's worn like my BJ Raji jersey, my Calvin Johnson jersey. That's the one jersey I don't let him touch, is my Hakeem jersey. So Steve Nash, point guard, Tracy McGrady, 2, Larry Bird at the 3, KG at the 4, and Hakeem at the 5. Really appreciate you if you got to this point in the episode. Hope you all have a great weekend. Next episode will obviously be on Tuesday. We will be covering the NBA in-season tournament. And for this episode, Kevin Martin. Actually, no, that's not really a good pick. Yeah, I'll go with it. Pero Antich. I hope you have a great day. Have a great weekend. Peace.